had Shook behind him, Snoop would be in jail right now. Or maybe just about to get parole.
Now, Keefe D's mistake is not getting the money up front because everybody knows Diddy doesn't pay people. So now they had a handshake agreement for $1 million.
Y'all, I had a feeling Puffy wasn't going to keep that same tough guy energy once jail walls closed in. Now a guy claiming to be his former cellmate is spreading a wild story that Diddy supposedly struck some kind of deal with federal authorities. According to the rumor, Diddy might even be willing to talk about the Tupac situation, with claims floating around that Snoop allegedly sold Pac out to Keefe D for money and weed. And if that wasn't enough to get people talking, the chatter also says Diddy could possibly end up out on house arrest way earlier than anyone expected.
There's a very slim chance that Sean Combs could be released from the detention center where he's been for the last year. Essentially, the judge has to decide whether or not he sides with the prosecution or the defense. They made arguments for Sean Combs being out today.
All right, let's slow this down for a moment because this is where the situation gets serious. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is currently the only person charged in Tupac Shakur's 1996 murder. He was arrested back in September 2023, and after multiple delays, his trial is now officially scheduled for August the 10th, 2026. So yes, this is a real case that's moving forward in court, but here's where the timeline starts raising eyebrows. A new report says Keefe D's attorney believes that if Diddy supported his latest version of events, it could give the defense a major boost. In simple terms, if Diddy ever took the stand and challenged those older accusations, it might strengthen the defense strategy. Now, pause for a second. That doesn't mean Diddy agreed to testify, and it definitely doesn't confirm any deal. It simply means the possibility has been mentioned behind the scenes. But in hip-hop, even the hint of something like that can send shockwaves through the culture. As many of you already know, Keefe D previously claimed in interviews and even in his memoir that Diddy allegedly put money on Tupac during the heated Bad Boy vs. Death Row era. That's his claim. Diddy has repeatedly denied having anything to do with Tupac's death and has never been charged in the case. Now Keefe, defense team is saying those earlier comments were exaggerated, possibly even made for attention or profit. And when your own past statements start working against you in court, the usual move is to discredit them. One way to do that is by calling in the very people you once accused and having them deny everything under oath. That's the strategic move people are watching closely right now. Meanwhile, newly surfaced court filings reportedly mention Diddy's name multiple times in connection to the case. Social media users claim his name appears dozens of times in those documents. Of course, being referenced in filings is very different from being charged with a crime. But when a name keeps resurfacing in a case that has haunted hip-hop for nearly 3 decades, people are naturally going to talk about it, and the conversation gets louder when old history resurfaces. Back in 1995, after Tupac was shot at Quad Studios in New York, he told Vibe magazine he believed Diddy may have played a role in setting him up.
So, you think Puffy was involved with the shit? Only they can answer that question. I have my own opinion, but I wouldn't slander their name like they did mine. I would say things that I knew, you know what I mean? I believe so. I do believe so. I have proved things that I can say that will back up my claim, but this is not for the world to know about. You know what I mean? It's between me and him, and only he knows. So every time he say anything happy, that's the only thing that makes this become an issue to everybody. Because you see what I said in the Bible, I basically bowed out. There was no glad about my life.
And Suge Knight even said that after Tupac was shot in Vegas, he confronted Diddy, telling him, "You got some explaining to do." According to Suge, Diddy didn't hold his ground, he ran.
What were the words you said to him before he ran?
You got a lot of explaining to do, rat motherfucker. Well, I ain't gonna cuss on your show. I said, you got a lot of explaining to convince me that you didn't have nothing to do what they said you did.
Diddy denied those claims back then, and he continues to deny them now. Even Mopreme Shakur, Tupac's brother, once revealed that Diddy personally called him to deny any involvement in Pac's death. The boy Puffy called me though. Puffy.
The boy Puffy called me though. Puffy called me back in the day. Back in the day, he called me. He was like, "I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. You know, I know who you are, but we never met. And I just want to call you man to man, let you know that I ain't have nothing to do with your brother's death." Now, why was he calling me, reaching out to me?
So the tension between these camps didn't begin yesterday. It runs deep, with years of history behind it, and a lot of emotions tied to that era. And things get even more complicated because Diddy's former bodyguard, Gene Deal, has been claiming for years that Death Row Records may have played a role in both Tupac and Biggie's murders, not just outside players.
that was something, that was all West Coast, bruh. That was all in-house. If you ask me, that was all in-house.
So you believe Tupac and Biggie was in-house?
I believe Biggie and Tupac was in-house. All had something to do with Death Row people.
And that's when Keefe D's own past interviews start coming back to haunt him. In clips shown in the Netflix docu-series Sean Combs, The Reckoning, he openly discussed being inside the car the night Tupac was shot and even pointed out other individuals he claimed were involved.
Did Diddy do that to Pac?
Do you know who was responsible for the killing of Tupac Shakur?
No, I don't. I think that Sean now, in my mature mind, had a lot to do with the death of Tupac.
Oh my gosh.
Prosecutors are expected to lean heavily on those past admissions as evidence. Meanwhile, the defense is arguing those statements were fabricated. While that courtroom battle builds, Tupac's family isn't staying silent either. Reports say they've hired attorneys and private investigators to look deeper into earlier claims about money allegedly being offered for Tupac's death. The family of the late rapper Tupac Shakur has reportedly assembled a team of investigators to explore what they believe could be a connection between Sean Diddy Combs and the 1996 killing of the hip-hop icon. If credible evidence emerges linking anyone else to the case, it could shift everything. If nothing is uncovered, the spotlight stays on Keefe D, but this is also where social media begins blurring the line between fact and speculation. Snoop Dogg's name has started trending again. Old Reddit discussions about rumored tension between Tupac and Snoop shortly before Pac died are resurfacing. Fans are replaying old interviews and revisiting questions about who was and wasn't in Las Vegas that night.
So let me ask you, so how was that energy like leading up to Tupac's death? Because where was you at like when you got that call? Because like I said, that was like the first serious, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, this the cold about it is I called Snoop. I said, Snoop.
Suge Knight also reopened an old wound, claiming Snoop Dogg and Dre were jealous of Tupac's rising spotlight, and that jealousy supposedly helped fracture Death Row Records from within.
When Pac got bigger than everybody on Death Row, that's when the jealousy kicked in. I guess that's when the plot kicked in. That's when the plan came up.
And what makes the story even darker is that some reports claim that just days before Tupac was killed, he had distanced himself from Snoop because Snoop had started reconnecting with Biggie again. That kind of fallout right before a tragedy is the type of detail people never forget. But let's be very clear about something important. Snoop Dogg has not been charged with anything, and there is no official court document naming him as a suspect in Tupac's murder. What we're really seeing is an old courtroom timeline reopening, and with it, a flood of old memories and debates. People are looking back at 1996 through the lens of 2026, and suddenly every detail feels slightly suspicious. But suspicion is not the same as proof. Right now, Keefe D remains the only person facing criminal charges. Diddy's name is resurfacing mainly because of statements Keefe D made in the past and because the defense might want those claims walked back. That's the current reality. Still, the pressure around Diddy isn't disappearing anytime soon. He's already dealing with multiple civil lawsuits and federal investigations unrelated to Tupac's case, so his legal situation is already complicated. If he were to testify in this trial, it would be a huge move. Taking the stand means speaking under oath, and once you're under oath, every word carries legal consequences. So the real question isn't whether he did it or not. The bigger question is strategy. Does Diddy step into a decades-old case to finally shut down the accusations? Or does he stay silent and avoid stepping into a courtroom storm? Either decision sends a powerful message, which is why this moment feels so significant. For nearly 30 years, Tupac's story has lived in documentaries, books, interviews, and conspiracy forums. Now it's becoming something different, a real trial with a real defendant and real consequences. The legend is colliding with the legal system. And when that happens, every old interview, every old rivalry, and every old headline gets dragged back into the spotlight. At the end of the day, though, the only thing that matters is what can actually be proven in court. as dramatic as the situation feels, and let's be honest, it does feel dramatic, the truth will ultimately come from sworn testimony and hard evidence, not viral hashtags. Now I want to hear your thoughts. If Diddy were called to testify, should he speak up and clear the air? Or would stepping into that courtroom only reopen wounds from a war that never truly healed? One thing is certain, this case is moving forward, the date is set, and once the trial begins, the story won't belong to bloggers or fans anymore. It will belong to the courtroom. And that's when we'll finally see which version of history holds up.